This module is important because it gives us the tools to measure our performance in market-related, brand-related, customer-related, and product-related areas. In this module, we'll cover several learning objectives: the strategic scenarios facing most companies, the metrics to measure performance for each scenario, and how to measure brand-related, customer-related, and product-related performance. We start this module by reviewing the analytics approach to strategy. In the diagram, we can see that we start out with strategy. We identify 3 typical strategic scenarios in this module. We then implement the strategy with the marketing mix and business operations to achieve results in the marketplace. We measure those results using strategic metrics, which is the focus of this module. The slide shows 3 typical strategic scenarios. Companies start by deciding whether or not to enter the market, called the market entry scenario. Having decided to enter, companies must then decide how to engage with the market, called the market approach scenario. Companies then strive to grow in the market, called the market growth scenario. The market entry strategic scenario can be divided into market entry and market exit. In market entry, we apply our competitive advantages to the characteristics of the proposed market. For example, Diaspora and other companies decided to enter the social networking market when it saw that market growing quickly. In market exit, companies decide to leave flat or shrinking markets or those suffering from intense competition. For example, Siemens decided to leave the radiation therapy market due at least partly to the intense competition it faced from Varian Medical. Companies entering markets can enter by growing capabilities in-house, called organic growth, or by acquiring another organization who already has those capabilities, called acquisition-driven growth. Having decided to enter a market, companies must now decide how they wish to engage with the market. According to professor and author Michael Porter, they face 3 distinct choices: cost leadership, differentiation, and focus. In cost leadership, companies strive to leverage low-cost operations to keep profits high. For example, Southwest Airlines flies only one type of aircraft, the Boeing 737, to keep operations costs low. In differentiation, companies drive profitability by convincing buyers that their offerings are unique. For example, the New York Times emphasizes its unique writing style to attract readers. In the focus approach, companies strive for profitability by specializing in one particular area. For example, Sunglass Hut specializes in nothing but sunglasses in its retail stores. Now that we've entered the market and decided our approach to it, we must grow if we wish to survive. Igor Ansoff proposed 4 key growth methods: market penetration, market development, product service development, and diversification. In market penetration, companies grow revenue by increasing sales of existing goods and services to their existing market. We can grow by targeting competitors, by targeting the frequency of usage, and by targeting the revenue per order. For example, Expedia encourages shoppers to book hotels at the time they book airlines, thus increasing the revenue per order. In market development, companies grow by increasing sales of existing offerings to new markets. For example, Dunkin' Donuts expanded geographically to increase its sales. In product service development, companies grow by increasing sales of new products and services to existing markets. For example, cosmetics maker L'Oreal markets multiple types of hair color products to customers. In diversification, companies grow by increasing sales of new offerings to new markets. For example, GE markets multiple products to multiple markets. We use different metrics for different strategic scenarios. We cover metrics for each in the next slides. For market entry and exit, we measure market size and market growth rate. For market size, we calculate the potential revenue available in the market. For example, the smartphone app market estimated to be about $15 billion in size. To estimate the size of the market, we use the techniques we covered in Chapter 2. For market growth rate, we conduct a periodic evaluation of the market size to monitor if it's increasing or decreasing. For example, word processor company Wang Laboratories failed to notice shrinking demand for standalone word processors as customers migrated to general-purpose personal computers for this task instead. To measure our effectiveness and market approach, we measure revenue and profit. We start with revenue. Companies typically examine a variety of revenue reports, such as the ones listed. Total revenue tracks to see how our company fares against its competitors. Revenue by business unit is used by large companies to track revenue of its various businesses or business units to identify the success of each. Revenue by product or service is used to discover the most popular offerings. Revenue by geographic region is used to identify areas of high sales. Revenue by segment is used to determine the popularity of our products and services with our targeted segments. We continue our discussion on metrics for the market approach by examining profit reports. Profit is defined as revenue minus cost. Similar to what we saw in revenue, we can run several different types of profit reports. Typical ones include profit by business unit, profit by product or service, profit by geographic region, and profit by segment. Basically, we can run profit reports whenever we know both revenue and cost information. One first step to calculating profit is calculating contribution margin. We define contribution margin as the selling price per unit minus the variable cost per unit, all divided by the selling price per unit. Variable costs include the parts and labor and other related expenses related to making 1 unit of output. We examine contribution margin to see how much net money we make from each unit we sell. We can define ROMI, also known as the return on marketing investment, as the revenue from marketing multiplied by the contribution margin divided by marketing spending. We then subtract a 1 from the calculated value. ROMI tells us how efficient we are with our marketing spending. For the market growth strategic scenario, we measure growth rate. We can look at growth in sales from one year to the next, called year-over-year growth, or year-on-year growth, or consider growth over longer periods where we use compound annual growth rate, pronounced CAGR. For year-over-year revenue growth calculations, we subtract the difference in revenue from the end of the year to its start, called the ending value, and divide by the revenue at its start, called the starting value. For example, in its 2011 annual report, Apple stated $65.2 billion in revenue in 2010 and $108.2 billion in 2011. We calculate the year-on-year growth as $108.2 billion less $65.2 billion, all divided by $65.2 billion, for a growth rate of 66%, which is a commendable value for such a large firm. For CAGR, we divide the ending value by the starting value and take that value to the power of 1 over the number of periods, and then subtract 1 from the entire result. On the slide, the upward pointing arrow is called a caret and signifies an exponent. For example, if we started with $100,000 in revenue and ended 3 years later with $150,000 in revenue, we would calculate the 3-year CAGR as 150,000 divided by 100,000, taken to the 1/3 power, and then subtract 1 to get 14.5%. If this appears complicated, don't worry. Microsoft Excel provides a function called XIRR, which automates this calculation and spreadsheets.